Hi, I'm Garrett with IDC Woodcraft, and I am so glad that you've come to this channel and video. If you are working in Vectric, whether you're doing Aspire or Vcarve Desktop or Vcarve Pro, and you're trying to figure out what layers are, well, by the time you're done with this video, you are going to have a completely thorough understanding of what layers are for and how to use them. So just before we get started, I want to just give you some clarity as to why we use layers. Layers do three things for you while you're doing design work. Number one, it allows you to separate out the things that may be different in your design. Meaning you're drawing a circle in one thing, you're drawing a square in another one, you want it out of the way so you can draw stars in a third thing. Layers gives you the control to turn things on and off, which you're going to see very shortly. The next thing that layers enable you to do is when you have a complex drawing, you can get other aspects out of the way so your drawing design does not look so messy and it's easier to work with. And finally, layers gives you the ability to set up your toolpaths in a very organized manner. So let's just dive right on in and let's get you educated on layers. Let's go.
Okay, we are in Vectric, and I am going to assume that you understand the basics at least of design or using the design features. So in Vectric, when you open up and are working in it, across the top there's going to be a series of things that you can work with. Right here in the middle, this blue thing that pops up when my mouse hovers over it is the layers section. When you first open up a design, Vectric is going to create a single layer, and it's going to call it layer 1. And it is going to be listed right up at the top. Now when you click this blue area, it's going to bring a drop down area that is going to list all of your layers. Now before we get into this, I want you to understand exactly what layers are. Suppose you have a fairly complex drawing, design, doodle, whatever it may be, that when it's all together, there's just many, many lines, and it can be hard to work with each individual line or line types. And so what you want to do is get them a little separated. And imagine having a bunch of clear sheets of plastic, and each clear sheet of plastic has a different aspect of your drawing on it. So one may have swirls, one may have a few boxes, another one will have some lines, another one will have some words. And when you're working with each one, you can pull one of those plastic sheets out and put it on top and draw on that one while you're looking at the rest of your design. The other thing you can do is pull a few of the clear sheets out to be able to see things a little clearer. Layers, in effect, are the exact same thing, except in an electronic way. So with that idea in mind, when Vectric opens up, it creates one clear sheet of plastic that you can draw on, and it calls it layer 1. And that's what you see right here. So before we get into more sheets of plastic, I want to make sure you understand what all these features mean up here and how to work with them. So first of all, right up top, it says layer 1. That means that is the sheet of plastic that you are working on. When you have multiple layers, you'll have one selected and it'll be listed up on top. So that would be the sheet of plastic that is on top that you are actually drawing on. In each section, there's going to be several features. You've got the light bulb, you have a little square with an arrow, and then a little square and a circle with some text next to it, and then you have a little box over to the right. So let's walk through each one first. The light bulb essentially turns makes one of the plastic sheets clear, so you can't see what's drawn on it. So if you were to click the light bulb, you'll see it'll go dark. Now, when I click it, I want you to watch the boxes. These boxes are currently drawn on layer 1. And as soon as I click it, the boxes disappear. That means I've turned that layer off. Now, in effect, right now, the plastic sheet that the boxes are drawn on are still on top and you can still draw on them. I will explain that in just a minute. So right now we're going to turn this back on so we can see our boxes. And now we want to distinguish the colors. This is the other advantage. Let's say the one sheet you want to be blue, the next sheet you want to have red, the next one green, and so on. Well, that's what this little area is for right here. So when you click that, it brings a drop down where you can select the color that you want that layer or the pen that you're using on that sheet to be. So if we selected red and just click it, you'll see the box turned red, and you'll see the boxes down in the field have also turned red. If we want it blue, we'll click it again and change it to a blue color. That box is now blue, and the boxes down here are also blue. So we're going to turn it back to black for the automatic color. And now we're going to go to the next box. Now this next little box is no different from the text that's next to it. If you click it, the text is going to be editable. So now we can change the name of the text. The same would happen as when I just click over the text itself. So we have boxes here. So we're going to call this boxes. And when we're done typing, we just click anywhere off the field right here and it'll close out. And now that layer is called boxes. And over to the right is another sheet. And when you click that, a menu is going to pop up. Now that menu is going to have some other aspects in it that we will get to in just a moment. At the bottom, there's one that says add a new layer. This is where you're going to add more plastic sheets to your stack. So when we click it, it'll add layer 1. Use layer 1 because we've now taken the original name out that was layer 1 and it created a new one. Now you'll notice when I created that layer up top, it says layer 1. Whereas before, when it was layer 1, when I changed it to boxes, it was boxes. Unfortunately, I didn't point that out. If I go to select boxes, this is going to change. When you look at these letters here, you see layer 1 is bold and boxes is not. That means we are working on this new sheet of plastic that's currently called layer 1. If I switch to boxes, that means we pulled the boxes plastic sheet out and put it on top so we can draw on that one. And the way you know is by it being listed up here and it is bold over here. So now I want you to understand the one other thing. Right now we are currently working on the boxes layer. So that plastic sheet is on top of our stack that we're drawing on. If, if I hit the light bulb, that turns that layer off. But the boxes layer is now red and it is still listed up top. That means that we have basically made it so we can't see the current stuff that's drawn on that plastic sheet, but that plastic sheet is still on top of the stack and we can draw on it. So if I was to draw another box while the boxes are highlighted, what Vacrve is going to do is turn that layer back on, just like that. And now I have a fourth box and it's also black. And you can see it is now turned black as well. So that way you know that when you turn the layer off and the red is showing up, that means that that is the active layer currently. This can actually get a little confusing in a couple ways, and I'll try to remember to talk about that. So we have added a second layer. Now, why would you want a second layer? Well, let's draw something else in here. We're going to draw some circles. and our circles are right over our boxes, and we want to work with the circles, but it's looking pretty messy now. So we want the boxes out of our way so we can work with the circles. First of all, we're going to come into layers. We're going to select layer 1, which now is highlighted up here, and then we're going to select it again to change the name to circles. And we want our circles to stand out different from the box. So we're going to change the color of the circles to red. So our circles didn't turn red for a reason, because we drew them while we were on the boxes layer. So what I'm going to do is just highlight the circles, and I'm going to right click anywhere on the screen. And you're going to see a menu is going to pop up. Now down at the bottom, we have two things written here. We have copy layer and move to layer. So what we want to do is move the circles to the circles layer. You can see right now boxes is checked, which means everything I have selected up in the screen is on the boxes layer. So all we have to do is, while these are highlighted, is bring them into the circles layer by clicking circles. And now look at the circle's color. It is now turned red. And you remember, this circles layer, we made it red. So now the circles is on the second layer. And now we can turn that one off and see our boxes only. We can turn the boxes off and see our circles only. So now we want a new layer because we're going to draw some more stuff. We want stars. And we're going to just make new stars. Now we are currently on the circles layer, so the stars are coming in red. But now look how messy this is getting, and it's getting hard to work with things. This is where layers come in really handy, so you can get various things out of your way. So the first thing we're going to take out of our way are the boxes. So I'm going to just turn the boxes off, and that's going to clean it up just a little bit. But circles are in our way too. It's looking very sloppy. So what we want to do is move the stars to a different layer. So we're going to select the stars, and we're going to right click, and we're going to come down, and you can see they are on the circles layer, but we don't have a stars layer. So what we want to do is move it to a layer, and down at the bottom says move to new layer. So we're going to click that, and it's going to open up a dialog box. And we're going to call this stars, and we're going to set the color in the dialog box to blue. Now you can see it says new layer is visible and new layer is active. So what that is saying is the light bulb, when the new layer is visible, the light bulb will be turned on. If the new layer is active, and we check that box up here, this will switch over to stars. And that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to check that. And if you watch up here in circles and I say OK, it's going to switch to stars. And there we are. And if I just escape so these stars aren't selected, you'll see that they have turned blue. So they are now on a separate layer. And if I turn the stars layer off, they will go away. So now we have three different layers. Now let's draw something else. Let's draw a polygon. And we want that on the stars layer. But we're going to do some work right in here to the polygon. I want the polygon to stay on the stars layer, but I also want the polygon on a new layer called poly. So we are going to click the polygon. And there's a couple things that we can do. First thing, we can actually create a new layer up here, and then right click and copy the polygon or move the polygon to that layer, or we can take a little bit of a shortcut and we click the polygon, right click and go down to copy to layer, and we can copy it to boxes, which we just did. So now if I turn the stars off, the polygon has gone away. Now if I turn the boxes layer on, the polygon is also with the boxes. So basically the polygon is on two separate sheets of plastic now in the same position. what I want to do is I'm going to delete that, but before I do, well, if I delete it here, we'll go this route. I'll delete it here on the boxes layer, and then I'll turn the stars layer on, and it's still there. So now we want to copy the polygon to its own layer. So we're going to select it, right click, and go to copy to layer, and we're going to add a layer, and we're going to call it poly. We're going to change the color to green, but we're not going to make it the active layer. In fact, we're not even going to make it visible. So what that's going to do is the layer will be there, but we won't see it. It'll be turned off. I will click OK. Now poly is created, but it didn't turn the layer on. And here's how we can tell. We're on the stars layer. We got the polygon on the stars layer. I'm going to delete it. And then I turn on the poly layer. And there it is. So getting into why you want to do this is going to take a little bit of practice on your part to start to see why these different features come in handy. Essentially, now you just see a very sloppy screen with lots of junk on it, and the way we can work with each one is by turning the sheets off and just working on the one that we want to work on. So in this case, it's stars.
Hey, I just wanted to stop for a second and say if you're finding this video helpful, can you take a minute out and give me a thumbs up? And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them down in the comments. And you might want to subscribe to the channel because I teach this kind of stuff, deep dive, so you have a thorough understanding of Vectric, Vcarve, Desktop, Aspire. And I teach CNC routers for beginners as well. So if that's you, you might want to subscribe. All right, let's dive on back in.
Okay, so let's get into an example of when you would use so many different layers. I'm going to show you a fairly complex design I am working on. And we'll go right here. And I'm going to turn my layers all on this one. Now there's, as far as I know, there's no way that you can show. Okay, so when you right click over here and you want to turn all your layers on or start to turn layers off, you can go down to show and show this, show only this. So what if I clicked show only this, it'll turn every layer off except for the one that is selected, the layer that is active. If I right click and I come over show and I say show all, it'll turn all layers on. And there they are. Everything is turned on. So what I want to do is turn a layer off, and I want to show you why you want to use layers. This is a vacuum block I am designing for the Makita router with an engineering concept into it. Vacuum blocks have the brushes on them, as you know. Vacuum block dust shoe is the common term in CNC routers. They have the brushes on them, and I don't want a brush on mine. So I am engineering this thing up to start to create a vortex or a tornado around the router bit, so it actually sucks the dust up without having a brush in my way so I can watch the work. So that's what's going on here, and you can see I just have lots of different things going on. This flared out line is one thing, these straight lines right here are another, this is something else. So I need to define everything by the layers, and so everything has its own layer so I can see it clearly. And the advantage of that when you get so noisy is when you're actually generating toolpaths. When I am trying to select things like these green lines, I have to be really careful not to select the blue line. So in order to be able to just generate a toolpath for the green lines, I can turn everything off except for the green, like that. And then I can generate my toolpaths for that. So that's where layers come in really handy when you're starting to work on some pretty complex stuff. All right, so let's move on to a simple design. and I'm going to do this one here. Let's see. All right, so I'm going to switch over to the um, image all by itself. Now, this is a fairly simple, straightforward New York State cutting board plaque, whatever you want to call it. We won't use layers on something like this because it's so simple. We're going to have two tool paths. We'll have the Vcarve tool path for the words, and then we'll have a profile tool path for the state shape. So it's very simple. We don't need multiple layers on this, although there is a second layer, and that's because I have a bitmap on there. I have many videos, or several videos, about how to work with bitmaps, so I'm not going to discuss this. When I generate tool paths for this, it's very simple. I would select the state outline and create a profile toolpath, and I would select the name and create a Vcarve toolpath, and then I would generate these toolpaths, and it would end up looking like that. So this isn't a time when you're doing something like this, you just don't need to fiddle with layers. Now I've got another design here where layers have come in handy. So I'm going to close that. I'm going to actually delete these toolpaths that I've generated for this so I can walk you through step by step where you will likely be using layers early on in your design work. Now I'm going to reset things. I'm going to close that. We're going to come over to the drawing area and get our 2D view and turn all the layers on. So we're going to show all. Okay. So I have 4 different layers on this tree of life. And by the way, just so you know what this is, I'm going to show you an image of it. This was a glass etching that I did. So I'm going to go through my computer and go to my designs. And these are all different designs I've worked on. And this is the tree of life. So let's find the best picture we can refer to. We'll just take this one right here. I want you to understand why I'm using layers on this one and why you will use layers on something similar to this. So this is a glass etching. And if you have not done anything about glass etching, you will want to watch the video that I made that walks you through it. Glass etching is my favorite thing to do on a CNC router. And so I'm going to put a flag at the top of the screen somewhere, and there will be a link down below. You want to watch that video. That is like one of my most popular videos, and I'll just put it out there. Okay, so this design, when we zoom into it, you can see that there is a lot of detail in here. I'm going to come in even closer. So we have the tree, which the toolpath actually followed the outline of the tree. And then we have the detail in the birds, the eyes and the wings. And then in the leaves, we also have detail where there's a little line in the leaves. And then we have all these hatch lines. So what I wanted to do was keep everything separate so I could generate my tool paths in certain ways and basically control the way Vcarve is going to generate those tool paths. And I wanted to make this possible to not just engrave on glass, but to engrave on a board as well. And by the way, this vector, I do give it to people who buy the tool set that I sell. There's a link down below for that. The starter pack for CNC beginners. It has pretty much everything you need. So let's go into the design. And let's say I didn't want to do this on glass. Oh, by the way, the reason I did it on glass, added all the hatching, is so the tree would pop out on the glass. So there are 4 different layers that I'm using. And they are small detail, which would be the leaves and the details of the birds. Then there's the hatch, which is all the black area. And then there's the reference line, which is the box on the outside. And then there's the tree outline. So I want to explain to you something about another advantage to layers. They can be used as construction lines or just lines that you draw out that you use for reference. In this case, my reference line is the boundary of the mat in this picture. So it would be this area along the picture. And I wanted to make sure this was centered up in that area. And that's why I created that boundary. You may draw in other lines and intersections so that you always have a reference point to draw from. Well, you don't want to actually carve the reference lines or engrave it on glass. So when you're done, you would just turn that layer off and keep it inactive. So I want to tell you where this comes in handy. You understand the layer idea, and I'll just show you these layers in detail on each one by itself. So we're just going to start to turn some layers off. And the first one is the tree outline. Let's make that active. The tree outline, so you can see that it is the tree and it's the circle and the birds are in it, the leaves are in it, but it looks kind of dull and plain because the details of the birds aren't not there, the little lines and the leaves aren't there. But I wanted those features to be separate, actually for my video, but that I made for this, which I'll put a link in the description as well. So that's the tree outline. Then we have we'll do the small detail. Now the small detail are the details in the birds and all the lines on the leaves. Now this was drawn up with the tree outline turned on, but I created a second layer, and the second layer, called small detail, was the active layer. So all the drawing that was going on at that point was on that layer. And then there's the third one, which is the hatching. So the hatching is for engraving on glass. When you're doing it on wood, you won't do it because it'll look like shit, basically. So when it comes to generating our toolpaths, I'm switching over to toolpaths now. We want to be able to select different things in the order of operations that we want this to go in. And when I'm saying order of operations, that's the steps in which you want the machine to be performing its work. I will do a video on order of operations because that's a pretty important thing to be aware of when you're first starting out. Is what needs to be cut first, what needs to be cut second, what needs to be cut third. If you go out of order, you can mess up your jobs. So let's just say you saw the glass carving, so we're going to do this on wood, so we don't even need the hatch lines. So we are just simply going to turn that off. And so all we really have to do now is do a profile cut. But one of the things we don't want to do is go deep in the details in the profile cut. The profile would be like with a V-bit, and it's just going to follow the line as it's carving out the wood. The tree detail, this, will be deeper than the small features. So what we're going to do is turn the small features off. Like that. Oop, wrong one. Or we're just going to select the tree outline. Ideally, what you want to do is turn the layers off that you don't want to work with and come in and select everything. The only reason that the tree outline selected the whole thing is because this is one complete line, a closed vector. You may have lots of multiple lines, and most of the time you will. So now I'm going to do a profile toolpath with a 60-degree V-bit, and I'm going to go 0.05 inches deep. I'm going to be on the line, and I'm going to run it. And so now that's run. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the color so we can see this better. We're going to turn it to gold. And now we're going to run the toolpath. And there it is on a piece of black granite. And that actually looks pretty good, but it's still missing the details. I mean, this actually would work, but we want it to stand out just a little bit more. So now what we're going to do is go to split screen up here. And we're going to turn that layer off. And we're going to turn the small detail layer on. And so now there's the leaves and all the details of the bird. We're going to select everything. We're going to go back into profile, and we want this to be not as deep. So we're going to make this a 0.04, and we'll generate that toolpath. Now I didn't name the other layer, so I'm going to name this layer small detail. And calculate. And now it's calculated. We're going to run that toolpath, and it barely shows up on, it actually almost doesn't show up. Oh, it doesn't show up because I don't pick a color. I'm going to pick gold for that as well. There we go. So the fine detail, I didn't want to go as deep, otherwise it would have taken out the character of the drawing, made it look a little bit messy in the carving. If I was to do hatch lines on a piece of granite, it's just not going to look very good. Maybe it might, I don't know. So now with all that, you understand layers. One thing I want to point out, you notice right now layer tree outline is red, which means that that layer is turned off. When you're generating toolpaths, whether the layer is turned on or off, or the active layer, it doesn't really matter. This is a very different function when you're generating toolpaths. It is not a design feature, it's a machining feature. So that layer thing doesn't matter. So if this video was helpful to you and now you have a lot more clarity on layers, give me a thumbs up and a comment. And remember, there's a bunch of links down below to the router bits that I sell, the vector file to this. There's be information about that below as well. I hope you have a great day and a better tomorrow, and I will talk to you next time.